Hello, I'm Julie Thibaud-Dury, Closiist Corner. I met so much incredible green people in New York City that I decided to make a sustainable guide, Green for Blue. With Closiist, our sustainable marketplace, I already helped people to buy sustainable, but it's not enough. Hello, Nathan. I wanted to meet you today to talk about philosophy and sustainability. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nathan Dufour Oglesby, and I am a writer and teacher and artist and rapper, and I like to explore the relationship between ecological considerations and the ecological challenges that we face as a society, and philosophical ideas, basically how we think about nature and how we think about matter and how we think about ecology and the effect that that has on how we address it and our behavior.
Yeah, like I know the modern times has profoundly changed our relationships to time, nature, and technology. And in our time, the priority has been given to economics, political, and even environmental perspectives. But I would like to see with you if it's that we talk about nature today, because when we say nature, we think that there's human and nature, but at the beginning we were both. And what can you say to us to explain why there's a difference and what philosopher can say about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, nature is an interesting concept, and I think one of the most pernicious and destructive strands in our thinking is the division between the natural and the artificial. Because nature in a literal sense just means process, or the process of becoming things. It's a very abstract word. It refers to all of the matter in the universe cycling through the different instantiations it has in different types of objects. That's very inclusive, but it doesn't mean it's not a beautiful thing. But when we relegate nature to just being trees and beautiful paths going through the woods in some conserved area and distinguish that from the artificial on the other side, it makes it so we devalue, in a certain sense, the artificial things that we've made, and so we treat them with even less care, which leads to the culture of waste that we have. And then even the kind of care that we put on those conserved spaces makes it very other from us. We are cut off from it, which makes it, in a way, easier to ignore. We have the Disney Channel version of nature over here with some chirping birds and some beautiful flowers and wooded paths, circling up a mountain or something. And we're able to almost think of that as either something that fits our taste or doesn't. Oh, I personally love nature. Oh, I don't care about nature so much. But there is no escape from nature. There's no escape from the process of matter and its interrelations. And if we can de-romanticize nature and make it the truly inclusive concept that it is when we start to think about our ecological policies and how we educate people about the nature of things, I think it will make it so we have a more holistic relationship with objects in the first place. Consider, for instance, reusable items. A reusable item is it's an object that you have a relationship with. Like not everybody, but many people have a favorite mug or a favorite cup. How different that is from the kind of relationship we have with a plastic cup or an aluminum can or something like that. And the aluminum can is perhaps the most interesting example, because from an ecological perspective, in terms of how people are typically educated about environmentalism or recycling and things like that, we think, oh, it's aluminum, it can be recycled, that's a good thing. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but our recycling systems are very imperfect as a mechanical process. It doesn't fully recycle, it still creates waste. But more importantly, there's something in the very essence of that is just not very whole and not very soulful and not very grounded, because it's a thing that you don't want to have around. You want it only in the time that you hold it. And we don't treat people like that. We don't treat our pets like that. We don't treat things that we love like that. I'm not saying a cup I'm not saying your favorite cup has the same status in terms of importance as your child or your friend. There can still be a hierarchy. But why should every object not be an object of care? And the reason that it's not an object of care is rooted in this difference, I think, between the natural and the artificial. which is not based in anything but an accidental process that I think has its roots in the economic forces that have brought us to commodify nature.
Yeah.
Because as soon as something becomes a commodity, a project, or a product, rather than something that's part of the larger process of things, it sticks out, it juts out as this thing that we want to use and throw away.
Do you think that maybe it's the words that we use, maybe that we convince us between to thinking that we are the nature too, because when we speak about progress and things like that, we in this sorry, I have a lot of words in my head, but you know, when you use some words, the words can explain that we are different from nature too. And maybe we need to change the word.
Yeah, the word choice is super important, and I think in the context of thinking about eco stuff or climate stuff, the words are super important as well. Environment means something that surrounds you. That's its sort of literal root. And that too it's not that that's a bad word, but it makes it feel like you're sort of plopped into something, like we're aliens or something, or the Garden of Eden was made and we got plopped in it and then we messed it up. And there is a certain mythic reality to that, but I think ecology is a preferred word for me because ecos means home. So maybe instead of even using the word nature, we think of it all as the ecos. Everything is the home, and it's the inescapable home. It's the home that you cannot be outside of, the inside that you can't escape. Even when you're outside, you're still inside it. The planet, at least, is one of those. It is one living ecosphere, and so I prefer that as a word. That said, the right word from an etymological or philosophical perspective is not necessarily the right word from a strategic perspective, because it's really more about the aesthetic experience of people and what their associations are. And almost all of these words have been tired out. This is something I don't have a solution for, but I know for a fact it's becoming increasingly painful and distinct to me that when I even say eco to somebody, when I say green, when I say sustainable, when I say environmental, when I say compost, when I say reusable, when I say pollution, when I say climate, it creates a twinge in the heart of probably more than half of the people that I could possibly talk to, at least in the United States, of, that's not my thing, or, ooh, I'm a little bored, or, oh, I'm a little pissed off that you even brought that up. And the reason that I know that they're experiencing that is because I've asked people, and because I even feel it in myself. Even as somebody who advocates for this, I'm a little bored. For the same reasons of what we're talking about, that it is relegated, it's a genre, it's an identity, it's a hobby to care about this stuff. And so we do need new words, and I don't know what they are yet. I don't know what the new words are.
Yeah. No, it's difficult to figure out. But if we imagine, it's funny because if I imagine a world without the word nature, we could say that we destroy us. And it's definitely not the same meaning.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and earth is a powerful word.
Yes.
And I think it's harder to eradicate the power of earth, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I would almost say, I mean, this is a little bit specific and tangential maybe, but I mean, earth is a Germanic word. So for an English speaker, even if they don't know anything about what English comes from, English has its Latinate roots and its French roots, but it's still genetically a Germanic language, and so it's some of its most important words, its most vivid words: heart, earth, soul, self, the things that just feel deeply poetic, like you can't pull them out of you because they are you. Whereas ecology, it's a Greek word, a Latinized Greek word, and it's very abstract. And so it is harder to attach meaning to abstract words and easier for abstract words to become annoying very quickly.
Thank you. What do you think, what separates us of nature? I know we already talked about, but how we can help people, what philosophers say about that, to be more, to use, for example, a word, we say us and not nature and human. What can be...
So what's the question exactly? Like what?
What separates us of nature? Because I know that there are a lot of philosophers who explain to us that there's nature. Some philosophers say that we need to rethink everything, like Timothy Morton too. And what's the meaning of that?
I mean, so what's the process by which we become separated? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, the first thing that my mind goes to is there's a book, Dialectic of Enlightenment. You know, you're familiar with this? And Horkheimer and Adorno, those authors, those critical theorists and philosophers, talk about how they sort of paint a picture of or they imagine the unfolding of the strange adventure of the development of the collective human psyche and the original sort of experience of you're just surrounded by phenomena, and there's terror and joy and pleasure, and lightning strikes and rain falls and sex happens and death happens and all of these things. And gradually we moved into our mythic understanding, where we saw these things as forces, but forces that were just as much a person as we are, just as much subjective. Because if I start to separate, even in the first infantile stages of what an infant goes through, where it's starting to separate itself from the mother, there is no reason to assume that immediately we start thinking of anything as an it. Everything is its own I, another I. And so I think those thinkers and other thinkers posit a stage in which everything is a self. Everything is so when the outside world for me is a you, and I address it as a god or as a goddess, and maybe just as one god or goddess, or maybe as a multiplicity, or maybe both of those things at once. And then gradually that process continues, and those things lose their magic, and we begin to rationalize, because we observe with such recurrence the systematicity of the behavior of those yous in the world, those others. And they become not even others, but just things, just bare matter in random little pockets and chunks. And we become really adept and skillful at manipulating them. But now we don't even have the reverence, and we've lost... When you lose the fear, you also lose the love, because love and fear are very closely bound together. And I don't think we fear the earth very much anymore, and that's why we also don't love the earth anymore. And so in terms of how to get back to it, I don't know. You know, circling back to the question of what do we do now in terms of how to, at the earliest level of education, shape the eco-psychology of our fellow human beings. What works? I feel like we have a program now, at least in the United States, a lot of ecological messaging falls into one of two categories. Either very fear-based, where it's like, we're going to screw up everything if we don't make these changes, where you could die, people will lose food, cities will be flooded, oh shit. There's the crisis mentality, and then on the other side there's the romanticizing gesture and the love, and it's fun, and let's take care of one another. And both of them are missing something. And maybe in a way, we have to find a way of joining that love and that fear together. And I don't know how that's done on the abstract level of talking to adults. Although I'm increasingly feeling that my very inquiry, which is into how to talk to adults about this and how to sort of philosophize it, is maybe irrelevant. Because the far more relevant thing is people who are growing up and shaping their experience of reality from infancy to now. Those are the people in whose hands the future actually is, and those are the people who don't have to unlearn anything, they just have to learn something. And you don't need to think about that in terms of abstractions, literally just expose them to it. We're talking about matter, have them interact with that matter. If our early education has us literally with our hands in the dirt, in addition to having our hands in the pages of books or on phones, then you'll have a relationship with that stuff. You just will. And all of these airy abstractions about do you love it, do you fear it, is it ecology, is it nature, whatever, become secondary to the primeval relationship that you have, because as a kid you've grown up planting things, growing things, you know. Which, very important distinction here, and I think this is another thing that is important to distinguish in environmentalism. When people have a distaste for it, it needs to be emphasized that we are not advocating that everyone becomes a farmer. We're not. The radical call is not to go back to the Middle Ages, or to make it so everybody has to grow their own tomatoes and spend all of their life farming. It just means that some relationship is missing there that should be there. The same way everybody is taught arithmetic and everybody can do basic addition so that they can function as a human being. That's what we're missing. That's the big gap, is we don't know where our food comes from or even how to grow it if we had to. And if we can really robustly fill that out, so that just as people have a relationship with literature, although that's diminishing as well, just as people have a relationship with the physical sciences, although that's diminishing as well, to have a relationship with the processes that bring us our actual nutritive life and the processes by which things grow, both things that we want to consume and things that we want to have grow for their own sake, because they're just part of our ecosystems. Yes. It's a very long response to your question, sorry.
No, it's perfect. It's very interesting because when I sell product on Closiist, I often explain to people that it's important to think about before you buy something. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes it can be not very zero waste before mm-hmm. you buy a lot of pollution, and mm-hmm. I think that's why it's very interesting that you said. We need to think about before we see something, what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think philosophy can bring us to fight against climate change?
I think, and I could be wrong about this, I've made it my project to pursue the perhaps chaotic quest of getting people interested in philosophy so that they are more intimate with themselves and with their world. History seems to show that not everybody is that interested in philosophy, but I don't think it has to be that way, because things change. Our attention span changes and shifts depending on what kinds of things we put into our experience. Mm. People have the attention span to watch shows that are cumulatively weeks long, hours and hours and hours of The Sopranos, Succession, whatever the show is. We've discovered that the long form of storytelling is something that we can have a deeply intimate relationship with, and a great attention to detail and collective joy and collective engrossing experience. There's no inherent reason that acquainting yourself with philosophy, that's to say the pursuit of the connection point between ideas about the nature of things and how those ideas play out in your behavior, that's wisdom. There's no reason to assume that entertainment and content about wisdom can't exhibit the same fascination. And I would even say that it's trending that way. What is the most popular type of content on TikTok? I don't know, but a lot of it is educational. A lot of it is. I don't know if it's over 50% or something, but it's a lot. It's an astonishing amount. More and more people are choosing to be educators. And there is hope there. There's hope because it is embodied wisdom, as I call it. It's ideas and how those ideas relate to how you're going to feel as a human being, what they can do for your mental health, and what they can do for your behavior. That is the trend of things. It's not academic philosophy where we just cultivate ideas for their own sake. And so I would say that has proved to have almost nothing to offer our ecological considerations and our way of addressing these crises. But what philosophy does have to offer is tied to what philosophy was in its older sense. And I say that in the specific sense of the early Greek tradition, where it really was about how to live. And I also mean philosophy in the broader sense of a global phenomenon among ancient cultures, where there was some role for cultivating wisdom, what the Greeks called Sophia, which is how the ideas and the cultural knowledge and our behavior connect, And so I think that we're getting back to that in some strange backward way.
What's mean philosophy?
What is it?
What's mean philosophy?
Literally, it's the love of wisdom. The phil part means love, and Sophia is a Greek word that we usually translate as wisdom. But again, it's not wisdom in the disembodied sense of somebody sitting and meditating on the top of a mountain and never coming back down into the world. It's wisdom as a practice, as a sort of code of life. Okay. Interestingly, the word in Greek sometimes was originally synonymous with poetry, the cultivation of ideas. And poetry has this aspect of embodying things. It's the songs that you sing that give your reality and your life color and richness. And so what are the ideas and moral ideas and ideas about God and ideas about nature that enrich your life, that actually enrich your life, that color your every day and your every moment? And so that's what it is to me. It's the love of that,
Yes. It's good to know. I would have just finished with you and talk about, I know we have a lot of things to to say. But can you talk about Timothy Morton and his book about ecology without nature? I think it's...
Yeah. Did you check it out at all? Yeah.
Yes.
So Timothy Morton is a thinker who has been influential to me because he talks about some of the same things that we've already discussed. The notion of de-romanticizing nature, and his catchphrase, among his catchphrases, is this idea, ecology without nature. Get rid of the division between nature as a place outside where beautiful things grow, and then the artificial human world where we have our buildings made of concrete and our phones that are, mined from cobalt mines and stuff like that over on the other side. It's all just matter in its operation and in its interrelation. And so if we can start to think that way, we'll be able to actually make realistic decisions about how we orient things. Because we're not going to get rid of the phones. We're not going to get rid of the buildings. We're not going to get rid of any of the artificial stuff. We should also even, strange as this sounds, stop thinking about saving the ecosystems that are outside of us. Everything is all integrated in one crazy misadventure right now. We're all swirling together right now. And if we lean into that swirl, then we can make it so we minimize the suffering of the maximum of beings, which is, I don't know if he would say that, or they would say, excuse me, if Timothy Morton themselves would say that is the highest good, but for me that is still the highest good, and I do think their way of thinking is a way of getting to that. We have already interfered with everything. You can't take that interference back. Now that we have interfered, own it, just like you would confess to somebody that you had done a misdeed, and then rebuild from there and restructure things from there. Their main thematic thing is that permanently we changed everything the minute we tested the first nuclear bomb. We permanently flooded the entire planetary ecosphere with radioactive particles that are still in every single little bit of matter on this celestial body. Don't pretend that when you go out into the Amazon that it's not there too. It is there too. The dark shadow touches every corner. But if we accept that, then it's no longer a dark shadow. Then we stand in the strange light of things as they actually are now. And then we move forward. Yeah.
Do you have other authors or philosophers to recommend to us to learn more about how can philosophy?
Yeah. Every time I get a chance to recommend a philosopher, I recommend Alfred North Whitehead, because he is the thinker that made me be interested in philosophy, really. I was sort of casually interested in philosophy, and then I read his book Adventures of Ideas, and that ended up being largely the subject of my dissertation and when I was in school. And here's what I like about Whitehead. Whitehead was addressing some of the strange aspects of modern science in the early 20th century, or in sort of the first third or fourth of the 20th century, when quantum mechanics was first becoming an alarming and new thing, where we were like, wow, waves and particles are the same thing somehow, and everything about the nature of matter itself is different than we thought it was, and we literally can't wrap our heads around it. It does not conform to our common sense. Similarly, relativity theory, these various things that were coming out that were revolutionizing the physical sciences but had everybody mystified. Whitehead suggested that we needed to go back to certain aspects of ancient philosophy to make sense of them, and that kind of thinking had been long since banished from the physical sciences. The physical sciences had gone, we don't really need philosophy. All we're doing is observing cause and effect in a systematic way, no problem. And that was fine so long as it still congealed with common sense. But at the point of our experiences with elementary particles, where it seemed that the same thing could be in two places at once because of our mathematical models, Whitehead and other thinkers philosophy for this, because apparently reality is stranger and more mystical than we thought it was in recent time, and the ancients were able to account for that strangeness and that mystical aspect. And they had concepts such as God and soul. And so let's go ahead and bring those back in. Let's, in a way, allow them to talk with the sciences. How does that apply to ecology? The consequence of a world that actually has a divine in it and actually has subjectivity in it, soul coursing through it somehow, is a world where we can be much more ready to be sympathetic with other material beings, both living, quote-unquote, and non-living. If I'm convinced that even the stuff that makes up this little teacup and that stuff that makes up the tea and the leaves that went into the tea has some aspect to it that is an I, the same way that I'm an I, then that can be the root of my moral responsibility to not be totally careless with it. Doesn't mean I can't drink the tea. Doesn't mean that I can't kill an animal to eat it. I'm a vegetarian personally, but I'm not saying that it's absolutely morally wrong to do that killing. But then I do all of that manipulation of matter with the supposition, the soulful presupposition, and quasi-religious presupposition that there is an actual other that I'm interacting with, to whom I have responsibility. And Whitehead is not the only thinker that provides the basis for that, but he happened to be my access point, and so I would recommend him, although he's famously challenging. But don't jump into Process and Reality. Read Adventures of Ideas. Plus, it's an awesome book title, Adventures of Ideas. It's exciting, you know?
Yes, it is. Another...
Other ideas? Who else?
Oh, maybe we can say that people need to look at your YouTube channel.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, if you really want some eco-philosophy in an entertaining fashion. Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel called Nathanology. My name is Nathan, so it's the studies of Nathan, both the studies of myself and myself studying things. And you can, if you search Nathanology on any platform, you'll find videos of mine that creatively explore some of the stuff that I've been running my mouth about. So
it's very nice. It's very, you can learn a lot. But
I'm glad.
To be true, at the beginning it will be very difficult for me because sometimes you think and it's very quickly, you know.
I was trying to be deliberately slow in talking just now, but I realized I kept going too fast. You know.
But it's good, like that I can learn more.
True. I should make an option to have the videos play slowly, like play them at like
yes,
half
please.
rate. Yeah.
Please for your friend Julie.
yeah, the Julie version, Julie edition. I like that.
Thank you so much, Nathan.
My pleasure.
Do you want to add something?
I am grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful for what you're doing, and I guess as a final thought, just to emphasize, ecological thinking is not a hobby or a special specific thing. Can be, but it's more than that, and it's simpler than that. It's just your relationship with the world. It's just having a relationship with the world. And if the word ecology sounds a little annoying to you, throw it out. It's not the word. It's the thing. Just like with religion, the words do matter, and traditions do matter, and ritual does matter, but the point is trying to get you with God. And so do whatever you got to do to get with God. Do whatever you got to do to get with what is. And love it, you know.
It's so true. When you start to have a sustainable life, you grow, you know, because you want to learn about so different topics, and I think you change your mind, and it's so, you feel it's so better after.
Yeah, it is. It becomes better, and the betterness comes with the actions, you know.
Yes.
That's the big point of conflict for me, if I'm being honest, is that I've created right now I'm starting a career for myself and gaining some momentum in it, and I'm grateful for that. But I do need to create more balance, because I do so much talking and so much creating, and so many people do so much talking and so many meetings and so much content, and that is good. But action is everything. Speech is a form of action. Art is a form of action. These are activities, certainly, but action ultimately too is about matter. Social interaction with matter, social cultivation of matter, and you got to do it. It's like you got to move the body, and I need to do more of that. So
Thank you so much, Nathan.
My pleasure. Very enjoyable.